So in my last few videos, I talked about how to know if you are struggling in your grief journey and how to know when you need help, if you're not progressing. And I have had quite a few people reach out to me to ask, okay, well, how do I know if it's been too long? Like, what is the timeline? And, I always say there is no timeline for grieving. And that is really true. So it's hard for me to tell you a specific timeline. But what I can do is tell you what society thinks the timeline is and why that sucks. So we're going to talk about that today. Stay tuned. There is this strange notion in our society that floats around that people should be over their grief like practically as soon as the funeral ends, right? Or maybe a couple weeks later, or if it's a very big loss, maybe like a year later. It sounds completely absurd when you think about it, but that is what our society tells us is normal. And that's what most people think until they actually go through deep grief themselves. Sometimes it makes us feel like crap because other people are telling us we should be over it by now and we should be moving on with our lives. And why do we still talk about our person? And why are we still crying and sad all the time?
Why do you look so sad?
It's often seen as like a personal failing if you're still feeling that loss after society thinks you should be done feeling the loss. And it makes us feel like crap about ourselves, like we're doing something wrong. Okay, I'm an English teacher, so we're going to go with a metaphor here. So think of grief like an earthquake.
Earthquake!
The closer you are to the impact zone of that earthquake, the more personal your involvement is with the person who passed, the more your life is shattered by their absence. This is why the amount of day-to-day interactions you had with the person makes such a huge difference and can affect your timeline so distinctly. So as an example, for those of you who are not in the close impact zone, you're kind of in the distant impact zone. So this might be something like a friend that you haven't seen in a long time or a family member that you're not all that close with. Typically, people can get back to their normal lives after they lose a person like that because it's distant. It doesn't really affect your day-to-day functioning. But for those of us who are directly in the impact zone, like right there in the center, and have lost people who were a part of our everyday life, for those of us whose lives were deeply intertwined with the person that we lost, it is a lot harder for us. And the process is far more complex. And honestly, if you're directly in that impact zone, it is really, really hard to put a timeline on your grief journey.
I'm still sad.
It's often weirdly the people who are kind of on the edges of that impact zone that put the most pressure on the people who are directly in the impact zone's path. And I'm kind of making this sound more like a tornado now than I am an earthquake, but you get the gist, right? The people on the edges of a zone might wonder why they've been able to kind of get back to their daily lives and you haven't yet. They may wonder why you're still so sad all the time and why you haven't moved on.
Why are they taking so long?
But the truth is, people like me and you, if you've lost someone directly in your day-to-day life, is we're still trying to figure out who we are without that person. We are navigating a new and totally different world than we had before. We're trying to live in a world that no longer has that person who was such a huge part of our lives in it anymore. And that, my friends, takes time, often a lot of time. So when people are expecting you to be over it or to start moving forward in a matter of weeks or months, they are not even close. They simply just don't understand the depth of the loss. I mean, to think in terms of weeks is laughable. Months, still pretty laughable. Even years, you can still be in that fog. And if you've lost someone, you know what I'm talking about when I say the fog. Not only like brain fog, like you forget stuff, but just sort of that fog of like that weird, surreal, disorienting feeling where every day feels strange and numb because your person isn't there. In terms of months and even early years, you're still trying to grasp the full weight of the loss that you're dealing with. I mean, for most people, I know it was for me, just using my own personal experience here. The first months and even a year of loss is filled with so much busy work. It is filled with handling like logistics, planning the funeral, notifying family members, dealing with insurance, and all that crap that you never realize that you're going to have to deal with until you actually go through it. And then you're dealing with the weirdness of friends and family, people who don't know what to say to you, and relationships that get awkward, some that you even lose because people aren't there for you when you think they should be, some that you're just trying to figure out what they are because maybe they're starting and maybe someone is being awesome for you and you weren't expecting it. Things are just totally topsy-turvy, and you're kind of in this constant state of just like reworking your life. But then after that time goes by and things start to settle down a little bit, that is when the loss really hits you.
When that pain hits, it'll hit hard.
Reality just kicks your ass because you realize that you're going to be living forever without this person and they're not coming back. That's not something that you just get over in a certain amount of time. That is an entire life adjustment. I've said it a bazillion times, but we do not talk enough about the reality of what grief is really like. And because of that, those of us that are grieving a lot of times feel like we're failing. And a lot of times other people are putting that pressure on us because they simply just don't know the difference. But the truth is, there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. You are human and you're trying to figure stuff out. Grief doesn't operate on a schedule. It doesn't have an expiration date. We don't just take off our black clothing and go back to acting like nothing happened. And feeling sad and lonely and heartbroken years after your loss, no matter how many years it is, that's okay. And it's normal. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that your connection with that person was so very strong. And that's an awesome thing. So why is it, if that's true, why is it that this myth persists that people need to get over their grief or get back to normal? Frankly, it's just because grief makes people uncomfortable. I still have experiences now. It is a little over 2.5 years since I lost my daughter. And I am just starting to feel like people are okay talking to me again. It's like people were so scared to talk to me. They'd see me in the hall at work and like head another direction. And I don't blame them because it's really hard after someone has had so many people in their life die, including their 10-year-old. No one knows what to say. No one really knows what to offer as advice. So people just avoid it and they act like it's not happening. And I'm starting like just now to get the sense that people feel like, okay, I think it's been long enough that I can like say hi to her and ask her how her weekend was without having to worry about, bringing up any bad things. It's like I've somehow hit that safe zone where it's like okay to make small talk because people aren't afraid that I'm going to start crying and bringing up the loss of my daughter, which is sad, but honestly, I get it. Our society looks at death like it's something private. It's not really supposed to be discussed in public. It's something we're supposed to deal with on our own, or just pretend it's not happening when we're in polite company. In reality, most people that know us are hoping that we're going to move forward quickly because it makes things easier for them. And it's not that they're being malicious, they're just uncomfortable and they're not used to talking about loss. As a result, though, it can feel incredibly isolating for us, the grievers.
Cast out of society like a leper.
So what is my takeaway here? If you're grieving, let go of the timeline. You're not failing because you're still sad. If you watch my previous videos where I talk about red flags that you're not doing very well, it's okay if you have those red flags. There is a certain amount of time that goes by if you are not functioning that is an issue. Grief takes work. And if you're not doing the work and you're still upset because you're sad and you're not, participating in your life, that can be a problem. Those are issues. It's not the time. It's the way that you're dealing with things. If you are ignoring it, if you're not taking steps to make some sort of meaning out of the loss, to try to live your life in a way that's not completely miserable. Basically, if you're not working through the process, that is when you have a problem. The process, though, doesn't follow a time schedule. And sometimes it's a lifelong process. And if you're watching this and you're someone who's supporting a grieving family member or a friend, the greatest gift you can give that person is patience. In essence, grief is not something that we get over, but it's something that we learn to carry. And as long as you're working towards learning to carry that grief in your life and carry it a little more lightly as time goes on, you're good. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope it clarified things a little bit for the people who had some questions after the last video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you could subscribe if you haven't already, hit the like button. It makes a huge difference for the YouTube algorithm, and I really appreciate it. And I'm going to throw out there that my book called Grief Sucks, But Your Life Doesn't Have to is available on Amazon. If you have read it, it would be amazing if you could leave a review on Amazon. It really helps to kind of bump up the amount of people who can see my book. All right. As always, feel free to leave your comments in the comment section. I love to hear from you guys, and I always reply to every comment. Until next week, I'm sending love and hugs like always. Bye, guys.